Well, welcome here, Punch Out Boxing. Delighted to be here with my good friend Jon Trethewey. John, it's the weekend has just finished where you put on one hell of a show at Stamford Bridge, UK v USA 2, and you came out as the winner. I just wanted to recap the show. First of all, tell us how was it looking back in terms of the logistics, setting the venue up, getting the promotion on there, all of that.
Yeah, good to see you, mate. And you're a good friend too. Good question to start off. Logistically, it was the hardest show to pull off. It was draining beyond belief. I have to admire Dennis Hobson. Let's get it right. Dennis Hobson and Steve Crump, Fight Zone. They're the money men behind these shows. I couldn't pull these shows off without that support. We went for somewhere big like Chelsea Football Club. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't easy to do. When you're dealing with and I would say because I'm a Chelsea fan, but when you're dealing with organisations of that magnitude, there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of things you've got to get through. So it's really, really hard. The hardest bit away from the venue was initially we tried to get 8 or 9 Americans over. Now, for anyone who's in the sport, trying to get Americans cleared medically, passed by the board in and across is hard work. And usually I'm talking about 1 or 2 foreigners from Europe that are flown in from Spain, France, Germany, Bulgaria, Poland, somewhere like that, which is a couple of hours on a flight. When you're trying to bring in 9 fighters plus a plus one from America, each state in America has got different rules on what medicals they have to have. Some states, for the benefit of people, don't have to have a brain scan. Some do. Over here, clearly you do, because we're very stringent, and that's right that we should do that and protect the fighters. So some of them did have it, some of them didn't have it. You're flying people over from different continents across the Atlantic. As I said, it's not just a couple of hours. So it was real hard work. And I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever been so drained on a fight week ever. So logistically, it was very, very hard. But you learn from it, Rashid. That's the thing. So now, next time we do it, or when we're dealing with a show of this magnitude, I definitely know what we do need to do and don't need to do.
Were the American fighters themselves easy enough to deal with, apart from the things out of their control, like you said, like the logistical side of the rules and regulations?
Yeah, they were. They really were, Rashid. We don't have the budgets that you get on Queensbury or Frank Warren or Eddie Hearn and Matchroom or even Sky Sports or Channel 5. So the purses that were being paid for these Americans were not massive sums. And I think what we worked on was the concept. It was UK, USA. The first one was a success. The opportunity for a lot of these Americans, and I'm confident in saying, I'm just double checking as I say it, every fighter that came over had never been to Europe or England.
Hmm.
So to come over and fight in England was a huge thing for them. Just like our fighters, I've got a lot of them at the moment going, John, can I come to Vegas? John, can I come back to Texas? Because the opportunity to do that's massive. So it was more the opportunity to come over. Some of them haven't even been out of their states. Um, it was a little bit different for them. When they flew over, it's a different country. Even taking them to the supermarket, we put them up in the Americans were in a really nice guest house, which is different from a hotel. We put them out in Epping, in a nice, swanky guest house where it wasn't loud and bustling because we wanted to give them peace. So it was a bit like when we're taking them for food, I took them at Tesco's and they were like, "This is a sweet shop. I'm used to Walmart, like where I am, which is about 10 times the size." So yeah, exactly. And that's genuinely the conversation. But they conducted themselves great. Whilst it's still very westernized and their language is English and America and England are close allies, if you like, it is still a bit of a different culture. So it was quite an interesting week for me. And I had the week off work. I went down, I picked up a lot of the fighters from the airport. I ferried them around to gyms, to supermarkets. I took them to press conference. We sorted getting them there. By the end of the week, I joked on another interview. I was almost Team USA. Clearly, I wasn't, but they were very nice people to deal with, and I enjoyed the week thoroughly.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can begrudge you naturally getting close to those fighters when you have been sort of almost responsible for them for the few days that they were here. One of the fighters, Brian Jones, looked like, did he bring his missus and family with him?
Yeah, you got to give them credit. They were the first ones that flew in on Tuesday.
Hmm.
They brought 8 people over from Missouri. And it was his wife. He had his dad there, who's his trainer. They brought his wife. His other trainer came over with his wife. There were a couple of kids there, and they came over and had ambition all week, as did all the Americans. To be fair, they talked a good game, and I was watching them in training and the way they were preparing, and I felt that it was going to be a really good fight. With Lucas, that fight, I still felt Lucas had too much talent from what I'd seen. We were fortunate to have Lucas's debut. He's then been on a Sky and a Channel 5 show since, so to get him back was great. But I felt Lucas did exactly what I thought, and he won with a shutout. But Lucas got some tests there that he didn't get in other fights, and that will put him in good stead for the fights down the line as he starts moving up the levels. And that guy is going a long way, I think.
Yeah. We'll come back to Lucas in a sec. I just want to run through the fights. We'll go in order. Start with Jack Hughes. He's your fighter, of course. Jack's come back this year. He's determined to get straight into difficult fights, big fights. Last time out, as he said, he went up against Jack Williams, a kid who's probably going to be one of the top talents in those weight classes in the coming years. Got stopped. This time he went in against a guy that's operated at world level in Morales, former WBC silver champ. How do you think he got on? Were the scorecards fair? Was it? I mean, some people I heard saying that they were a bit too close. That Morales was a clear winner. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I felt the scorecards were fair, and Jack won't mind me saying that. You got to admire Jack. This fella who came over, he landed at the airport, and I picked him up and I put him in the car, and he had a WBC international belt hanging over his shoulder. And naive that I am, I should know that. I should have known it from his previous fights. I checked out what he'd done, but he's a current WBC international champion. And then when you did your homework on him beforehand, as you said, I think he had 50 odd fights. So to be a current WBC international champion and Jack's highest level he's won a title at is Southern Area, I think Jack's better than that. He was very close for a Commonwealth silver against Lewis Roberts in Swindon last year. He lost a very close decision that was stopped early because of a cut. I think had that gone the distance, Jack would have won, but time would tell. It certainly looked like that, and he had momentum at the time. But Jack wants tough fights. Jack's at an age now and his experience. There's no point coming and fighting journeyman and just turning up. He wants the good fights. And Jack handpicked that fight. I found an opponent for him. Jack actually was going to fight someone who was 5-0 with 5 first-round knockouts, and it was declined by the board because of credibility of the opponents, which is fair enough, no problem there. So then he handpicked that fight. We reached out and asked him. Again, the pay wasn't great, and they went, "Yeah, we'll come over and have an experience." I was like, "Are you sure?" But he took it, and I felt he gave a great account of himself. I thought his credibility probably went up. We don't want him to keep losing. He did lose the last fight that he mentioned against Jack Williams. He's now lost this, but Jack Williams is going a very long way. I can assure you of that, 100%. And equally, as you said, this guy's fought at world level, and he's walking around with a WBC international on his shoulder. And I thought Jack did well. But I think Jack did come up a bit short. Maybe the experience told. Jack's been very vocal on Instagram. He didn't like the fact that there was a couple of pounds different in the weight and felt that wasn't organised properly. Not a dig at me, but, I'll look at it. But there was £2 different on the night. I think Jack's more suited at flyweight, if I'm honest, or super fly. When he's fighting at bantamweight, you can tell the difference. He's not tall. He hasn't got the range, but he's got heart and he'll take on anyone. But I was proud of Jack, and that was the first fight of the night that we went 1-0 down on. But fair play to Jesus. He came over here. He was professional. Him and his dad, the trainer, never been over here. Dad's from Mexico. He was born in Houston, Jesus, but definitely from Mexican descent. You can tell. But just a true warrior. Great fight, and it set the tone for the rest of the evening.
And what next for Jack? Yeah, I mean, he's always said he's dying for to fight over in America. Can you make that dream come true for him?
100%. Look, Dennis and I are looking to hopefully go to Vegas and do a show or some other places later in the year. Jack will take any fight, but we need to be sensible. Maybe I think Jack needs maybe a bit of a comeback fight, a bit of a learning fight, and sort of like rather than war after war after war. You don't see many fighters that do that. I'm not sure there's any gain in fighting journeyman, but sometimes getting a win under your belt or just a bit of momentum is good. The phone hasn't stopped today for Jack. I've had two fight offers for him. One's for an English title at one weight. One's for an English eliminator at another weight. The fight's got to be right though. If it's not the right weight or not the right fight, I will have some news for Jack probably over the next couple of days. But he just wants to fight, and my job's to get him the big fights, but equally the right fights.
All right, so we'll keep our eye out for that. The next fight, Arnie Dawson. I think I arrived just as he was leaving the ring. So if I was 30 seconds sooner, I might have caught it. I mean, this kid, that's two fights in a row where he has seen off Americans in spectacular fashion. When I spoke to Arnie midweek, he's the kid's too modest. He said, I'm not the biggest puncher, but I've got good boxing skills. Well, actually, kid, it looks like you might be a hell of a puncher.
Yeah, I think he's gone unnoticed in a couple of years when he turned pro. I know every gym, I know all the fighters, as you know, Rashid, and I think a lot of people from sparring maybe a couple of years ago feel they got the better hand of him. When you think about the fighters around that weight, they're all friends, they all spar, they're all local, they're all Essex boys. I think Marley Mason, Frank Arnold, Michael Webber Kane, Sonny Hardy, Arnie Dawson, they're all similar. They could all jump in with each other. It's hard getting these fights matched because they're all friends and they all spar. Some of them are in the same gym, so that would never happen. But
Hmm.
I think Arnie now, I'm not saying he's any better than any of them because I think they're all great and they're all my boys, to be fair. But I do think that at the moment, after that performance, he's kind of catapulted himself. I think that what I hear from the gyms is Arnie is better in a real fight rather than the spar. No
Hmm.
headgear, smaller gloves, that kind of stuff. He's technically very good and he can bang. Listen, he had two or three knockouts now. I think he's 6-0 with two knockouts, maybe three knockouts. I haven't got it in
Yeah.
front of me.
Hmm.
He went out to Texas with us and he easily won that fight with a stoppage. He's then fought another American over here, and this American, Devontae Jones, again, I was with him all week. He's 13-3. He's an experienced fighter. Now, look, boxing's boxing. When you get a flash knockdown, he got caught in the first round. But you've seen the show reels that are going around. I've posted it up. Everyone's saying it's compared to Tommy Hearns and Roberto Duran, the way he knocked him, the way he fell forward. So it might look good on a show reel, but that's because it was good.
Hmm.
I always say about Arnie, he's so professional, he's so polite, he's so respectful. The way he talks to people is just like everybody is like so important. He's a credit to himself and his team. Garth, you got to give Garth a shout as well. Great trainer. The game plan was brilliant. And he came out, knocked him out cold. I think it's 47 seconds. Someone told me it's 49, but either way, it was less than a minute, and he was poleaxed. And the guy didn't come over here to just roll over. As I said, they're not being paid big amounts of money. These Americans all came to win, as you could see. But I think Arnie's stock has just gone right through the roof. He's going to be very hard to match because he's undefeated and he's knocking out like prospects and good fighters. But I expect Arnie to kick on now. Hopefully, with us, there might be a fight offer on another show, and if that's the right fight for him, but we'll be part of that journey, and we wish him well. If he goes on to a bigger show and gets on a bigger platform, I'll be sat there front row watching him as part of his team because class him like family now. He's doing really well. Well done to him.
Yeah, he's a great kid, and it's great to see those kids from a small town starting on small shows, hopefully going to something big. Incidentally, the comparison with Tommy Hearns. Interesting aside, the late great Emmanuel Stewart
Hmm.
actually said initially he didn't think Tommy Hearns was a particularly special talent, but he said he was exceptionally dedicated. He never missed training and always trained hard, and eventually that brought the talent out. So who knows with
Good
Arnie?
comparison.
Yeah,
I think with Arnie, I think the thing is with Arnie, and he has a go at me, and rightly so, because I always say he's such a nice guy and all that. I think sometimes if you look at him and you listen to him, the way he conducts himself isn't a typical boxer. He's not a trash talker. He's not aggressive. He's just respectful. And sometimes that get lost on people. But listen, he knows his job. Garth comes up with the game plan. They go in there and they execute it every single time. And I think he's going places, to be fair.
yeah. Big up to Arnie Dawson. Yeah, landed the punch of the night. Um, I did get there in time for a fight that was an absolute banger. That was the cruiserweight fight between Oral Ignat and Stanley Johnson. Now, incidentally, was there a problem getting Stan over? Because when I spoke to Oral, he was saying that his opponent had been changed 3 times.
Mm.
Was there an
Yeah,
issue?
yeah, there is. Listen, when you're trying to deal with different federations, different states, medicals being cleared, you need it all cleared from America. You then need it all cleared in the UK. Sadly, quite a few of the American fighters weren't the fastest at providing the medicals, even though the fights were matched weeks and weeks ago. So when it came through, if the British Boxing Board have got some queries or questions on it, rightly so, that then needs to go back the other side of the pond. Some of these states have got an 8 hour time difference. Some have got a 6, some have got a 5. When they're looking at stuff, we're asleep. When we look at stuff, they're asleep. He got it over the line. Fair play to him. He had balls because he flew in just the day before, but he landed, he weighed in. And you got to give credit to Stanley because I felt he was brilliant. On paper, that was always going to be the fight of the night, which it was. Oral's 9-0 with 8 knockouts, and Stanley was 7-0 with 4 knockouts. Yeah, I was telling everyone don't blink. Oral got two knockouts. I think one in the first round, knockdown. Sorry, one in the first round, one in the second round. So that's like 2 10-8 rounds. So it was nigh on impossible for Stanley to win that unless he knocked him out. But he
Mhm.
came for it. He was rugged. He kept going. His heart was brilliant. And I think he had Oral in a bit of trouble in some of them later rounds and the mid rounds even. But Oral did enough to win a couple more of them for me. I think the result on the scorecards was probably fair. There's no excuses from anything. He won fair and square. There was a little niggle with Oral on some injuries beforehand. Speaking with Martin, I know we were a bit nervous about taking the fight, whoever it was, because of that. But you wouldn't hear them not talk about that. I will,
Mhm.
because the Peacock boys wouldn't mention that. But Oral got through the fight, and whilst we're used to watching Oral knock everyone out, he needs 6 rounds. When Oral steps up and he starts going towards British level and those kind of things, you can't just expect to knock people out and then step up and not have the rounds in the bank. It will definitely help him from an endurance point, and a good learning fight from him. Probably the best fighter he's fought. I know he beat the Scottish fella Forrest last time out on a Sky Sports show, but he knocked him out in the first round. So either he's that much better than him, or either way, he didn't get any rounds under the belt. So it was like, I will go and do the same again. Everyone loves a knockout, but to your point, I had people in the building, I mean, multiple people saying it was the best fight they've ever seen live. I got friends of mine who don't really follow boxing that much, but they follow what I do, and they're watching it at home on the TV, watching Fight Zone and talksport, and they were like, John, that's like one of the best fights I've ever seen. So we're proud to have that on. Both fighters are kind of with us. Sorry, not Stanley. I'm thinking of the other fight. Oral obviously works with us, and he's a Peacock boy. So watch his space. We'll probably have Matt again soon, and we watch him move on.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. He did need that learning fight because, as he said, I was really impressed with Stanley as well. After the first 2 knockdowns, I thought, well, it's going to be an early night, but he really came back, try to turn it around. And Oral, we now know he can take a shot on the whiskers, which, like I said, a fighter's going to have to go through that sooner or later. So, yeah, I think for both men, still a good future. Oral, do you think he's ready for titles? I mean, we know the cruiserweight division's stacked in the UK.
I think he will be. I think, just my opinion, when you've had, what is he now, 10 fights with 9 knockouts, the majority of them are quick early nights. I think he could do with a couple of these fights. I'm proud with the matchmaker. I'm going to give Dan Francis a shout here. He's the matchmaker on that last show.
Mhm.
It was a great fight, and it was a great learning. Give him one or two more of them. I say British level. Oral's got an English license, or definitely better than the Southern area. He
Yeah.
hasn't fought for an English title, but I think he's better than that. There was another kid on the card that you're going to talk about in a minute, and I think that's got British title written all over it down the line. And we would love to be part of both their journeys, and we know we will be. Whether we'd be lucky to get a fight of that magnitude as a British title on our show, money talks. So we need a bit of support on that. But even if it wasn't, I'd happily watch a fight of that magnitude. But maybe one or two more for Oral, and then
Mhm.
let's see how good he is, because I think he can bang. And you said it, your words, he can take out on the whiskers. If the endurance is there and he can work off his jab a bit better, I think Oral could go quite far.
Yes, indeed. Look forward to seeing where he goes. As he said, though, that the other cruiserweight kid we had, Lucas, I think he's fast rivaling Moses Itoma as the most prodigious young talent in the country, would you say? I don't think that's an exaggeration. I mean, looking at who he's fought so far, I mean, I think his last opponent, that Serbian guy who he fought on the Sky Show, had previously fought world title challengers. Um, and now his opponent, Brian Jones, he was like a little tank and just wouldn't stop for those 6 rounds. But again, Lucas's class, his ability just showed through.
Yeah, they're big words you've just said there. Are like when you're mentioning Lucas in the same sentence, and when Lucas watches this, I'm going to make sure I send it to him to talk about him in that same kind of sentence or paragraph as Moses Atuma's massive. Do I think that you're overstating it? No, I don't. You know, I started working with George for Lucas on his debut. We were lucky to have that. As you know, everyone knows he fought Joel McIntyre. I think he was a 2-time English champion. I
Mhm.
said it a couple of times, and George won't mind me saying it because we love him, obviously. I thought he was mad to take that in his first fight, but George has been there. He's got the t-shirt. That he's an ex-super middleweight world champion. Look at the level he's fought at. He knows what he's on about. He believed in his fighter, and he stopped Joel McIntyre. Then he went on a Sky Sports show next, where he stopped someone again. So that's 2-0 with 2 knockouts. He then had that tough fight on a Channel 5 show, which he didn't stop, which is good because he needs learning, but it was brilliant. And then this guy I matched, George was like, yep, I'll have it. And he didn't just say it on the phone. He's obviously gone away for a day of saying research. But, when you're a bit like, I knew this guy was tough. He had a defeat. He was 4-1 coming into it. But if you do your research on him, he was good. But on the night, and I was with them all week, and I wasn't nervous, but I watched the way he had his dad as his trainer, he had his assistant trainer come over, his family come over, the way that they were conducting themselves. They thought they were winning the fight, and they weren't deluded. They genuinely fought. But absolute class on the night for Lucas. I think you're right. I think he is a massive talent. Punch perfect. There's show reels flying around. I've just added some stuff that was sent to me by Lucas, funnily enough, on my story on Instagram, and it's showing, the art of boxing. This guy was coming forward, he was lunging, he was throwing big haymakers, but he weren't connecting enough because Lucas was far too clever. He was setting traps, and he won a fight 60-54. And I do believe you're right. I do believe he goes a long way. If he's at the level, different weight clearly, but if he's at the level of Moses Atuma, I'll be a very proud man because when he does go and win a world title, probably not on our show unless we develop very quickly. I'll be proud to say that we were part of his journey, and watch this space maybe for some Lucas fights with us coming forward, because it is good working with him. And we're lucky to have him and George on the show because it's nice. All of our fighters we treat the same, with respect. I'm not the one who gets in the ring. They are. They're the ones who get punched in the face. But sometimes when you see real talent and you've got them at your level at the moment, you're like, it's great to be part of their journey. And watch this space with that guy. Give it 2 or 3 years. He's only young. There's no need to rush him. I'm not saying George is. I don't think he does. But George is taking tough fights because he knows the level he's at. When they're Olympians, I know he's not, but you've seen Olympians jump in with like elite fighters after a couple of fights. If he believes that's the level he's at, which he's proven he is, there's no point putting him in with cannon fodder or journeyman because it's just a waste of time. Good luck to both of them.
Absolutely. Incidentally, I think these kids have, they can benefit a lot from being on these sort of smaller shows, where the crowd's like pretty much right up against the ring apron. Know the top coach, Buddy McGirt, he was actually saying that he likes his fighters who are top prospects to be on small hall shows where there's like the crowd throwing beer at them as they're walking to the ring, and that sort of thing. He wants them to go through that and not just be at the big glamorous events. So I think it's all part of the character building. So yeah, as you said, watch your space with Lucas, and of course the main event, Marley against Mandeep Jangra. It was the decider, 10 rounder. Yeah, Mandeep. To me, it looked like a fight of two halves. Marley's pressure, I thought, was more effective in the first half. In the second half, Mandeep, his counter punching and movement, I thought, won in more of the rounds. Is that how you'd assess it?
Yeah, and to be fair, we'd already won, as in the UK USA by then. There were 5 fights in the end, and we were 3-1 up going into that. But that was the headline because we felt that it was the fight that warranted. You've got to remember that Mandeep is a current WBF world champion. He's trained by Roy Jones Jr., so he's not going to be a mug at all. Getting Roy over and bringing one of his fighters is part of the deal, and we need to look after Roy there. I reached out to anyone to fight Mandeep, and no one wanted him. No one. Typical when you phone Marley, he's like, I'll fight anyone. So the fight's easy to make when you speak to Marley. And then when you look at on paper, I think Mandy was 11-1, and the current WBF world champion, and Marley was 5-2-1. But we know Marley fights, look at the people he's fought, people he's lost against, people he's drawn against, people he's won against. He doesn't take easy fights. 96-94 against that, I've got to be honest, I almost felt like we'd won it because I was so proud of Marley. I think you're right, though. Marley won't mind me saying experience maybe came through. 96-94 felt about right for me. I've got to be honest, by that stage, that was the last fight. I was having a little bit of a break and sat at the back because it was a hectic week and a hectic night for me. I haven't watched it back on the TV in peace, scoring it. But what I do know is I left the venue to go to the after party, and Mandeep was walking out with me. I was trying to persuade him to come and have a beer, but he didn't want to know. So we're not the best of mates, but we're good friends. But he told me he's never been hit so hard, and he told me that's the toughest fight he's ever had in his life. So those words from Roy Jones's fighter should make Marley be really proud. I think for Marley now, it's probably a bit of a regroup. Let's not keep jumping in with these fights. He's a promoter's dream because when you want the 50-50s, they'll take it. I think maybe just sort of like a couple of learning fights where he can learn some different styles, different approaches with a new team. He's really happy with his team, and this fight he seems to do well, but he should be proud of that performance for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I thought it was very close. I think 96-94 either way would have been fair. And certainly Marley on his social media earlier today, that's how he assessed it. So yeah, what would you like for him next? Now he's had a taste of title fights a couple of times. I'm sure he doesn't want to just have a journeyman and 6 rounders, will he?
No, I'm not sure. I have spoke to Marley today and I spoke to him yesterday to check in on him. He'll be back before you know it. He'll probably be announced on one of our shows in the next day or so. What will come next, we're not sure. It's easy. Fighters' shelf life isn't that long, as you know, Rashid. The more of those wars you have,
Hmm.
it's easy saying take the tough fights, but he's only ever taken tough fights. If you look at all those other names I've just mentioned when we're talking about Marley, and Arnie, sorry, a lot of them have had some nice, softer approach to it. They've stepped up and stepped up and stepped up, have some different journeymen, different styles, southpaws, come forward fighter, defensive fighter. He's not done that. And those kind of learning fights might make him that little bit more savvy when
Hmm.
he's coming into fights of that magnitude. I'm not saying that he wasn't, but Marley, you know what you get with Marley. I say it all the time. He's that I've got friends who come and watch my shows, and everybody loves Marley more than anyone because what you get is what you see. But sometimes if there's like a different approach or a plan B, that might put him in good stead. So watch this space. If it isn't a big title fight next, and it's something a bit different, then I'd imagine the one after will be straight back into it. But a class person to have on our shows always puts bums on seats, and people enjoy his fights.
Yeah, he's no doubt his fights are always fantastic. In the aftermath, I guess Dennis would have been ecstatic. How did the great Roy Jones take being on the losing side?
Well, I didn't want to wind him up because as much as I've met him a few times and he's one of my idols, I'm definitely not going to wind him up. But I kind of did say, thanks for coming, Roy, but we beat you. Yeah, Dennis will be well proud. Dennis has spent a lot of money on that. There's a lot of hard work on it from Dennis's team, a lot of hard work from our team as well. Everything about the show, like we mentioned at the opening of the video, was hard. It wasn't like a normal show that we're used to. Dennis does his shows up north. He can probably do them in his sleep. I'm confident that we can do our shows down south in London in our sleep. But there was a lot more to it logistically, as we've discussed. I haven't spoke to Dennis for a day or so, to be fair, because I think we're all sort of like regrouping. But I'm back to normal work, and the phone ain't stopping about fights. So We've got another show coming up in June. We've got 2 in May, and a lot of these fighters that fought at the weekend will be back out on some of them shows, which is great to see. You know, they're happy. The show was good. You know, the feedback I've had, it was at Chelsea. It was rammed in there. We had 2 sides of the arena. One side was tables, which were expensive seats with food and wine and drink, and the other side was sort of like your hardcore, maybe didn't want to invest or couldn't invest the amount of money for the tables that were selling, but it was busy. And all those fights you've just talked about, we haven't even really talked about the undercard, but it was great to have some like top talent on there and big ticket sellers as well. So we're pleased it was a great success, and we move on and we'll look to keep doing these big shows like we did the O2. York Hall's home, and I love it. I do love York Hall. It served us well, but it's nice to venture out elsewhere now and then. But we look forward to the 2 shows we've got in May coming up at York Hall.
And you've tantalized a lot of the fighters with the potential for that Las Vegas show towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I got to be honest. If and when we get this over the line and sign to agree to Vegas, which hopefully we will, it's looking positive. I imagine the queue to go will be very, very long. As you can see from both cards, the one in Texas and the one here, there wasn't any fights that really. Well, I guess you could say that, you know, Arnie's not that fella out in the first round, but I don't think that means the guy wasn't very good. Arnie just caught him, and it was a brilliant executed game plan, and he's made his stock go up more. But every fight we've put on is competitive, so it's not like we're taking people to America to get beat. Why would we do that? So all these fighters, for a lot of them, they might never go to America. They might never go to Vegas. So to go to America and get a purse and fight, and maybe some friends and family come out there. You know, when we had the meeting, as you've all talked about, Dennis and I were lucky enough to go out to Vegas 2 weeks ago, speak to the right people in the right places. You know, when we were in the casinos looking at venues, they were like, you can have all your pictures and your names up on the strip, on the screens. There was stuff I used to dream of when I was a kid growing up. It was never going to happen for me. But can you imagine for these lads to know that they're going to Vegas and have their face up on the strip? What better opportunity for them? You're never going to get anything better than that.
Yes, indeed. All right. Like I said, we'll keep our eyes and ears peeled for that. But before that, of course, there is the shows this May and June. But all right, Jon, always a pleasure. Thank you again for your time, and thanks for putting on a terrific show at Stamford Bridge. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
You too, bud. Thanks, Rashid.